One day I was sitting on a bench in the alley waiting for my buddy who had gone to see his fiancée off and would be back soon. My buddy and I had planned to go to a bar to discuss the upcoming bachelor party and have a few beers. The alley was a pretty romantic place, with couples in love often gathering here. This evening was no exception. There were many couples around me, and I was the only one sitting alone. I was bored, so I took out my smartphone to watch some new videos. I came across a video about vampire hunters. I was curious, so I decided to watch it. The video was creepy. From the first minutes of the clip, I saw the scene of a creepy beating in a dark basement. A few guys were accompanying a girl who was the lead reporter and describing everything that was going on. They walked through the basement and lit the way for themselves and the cameraman with flashlights, but even this picture perfectly conveys the atmosphere of what is happening. It was clear that they were all barely able to contain their fear. The reporters themselves did not seem to know what they were up against. There was blood everywhere, lots of it. There was even blood on the ceiling. There were torn, blood-soaked clothes on the floor. The presenter in the clip described what was happening, her voice trembling.
According to our intelligence, this place is a real vampire lair. We managed to follow one vampire last night, and the result was this very cellar. Once we established surveillance, we saw several more vampires. We armed ourselves with silver and prepared to fight before entering the basement, but found that someone beat us to it. But how is that possible? Did some brave people attack them at night?
The reporter pointed her finger at one of the jackets soaked in blood.
I definitely saw this jacket on one of the vampires.
That girl is wrong.
Suddenly that voice came from behind me. I jumped up from the bench in surprise. I saw next to me a tall and thin man who looked about 40 years old. His clothes looked old, but they were well groomed and clean. He had leather gloves on his hands.
May I sit next to you? It looks like all the benches around here are either occupied or unusable.
I agreed because I was intrigued by his comment about the video I was watching. And what was that girl reporter wrong about?
I'll be sure to tell you about it, but first I want to introduce myself to you. My name is Ephraim.
The stranger stopped talking and looked at me expectantly, apparently expecting me to introduce myself to him in return. John.
It's a pleasure to meet you, John. You see, your video is not about vampires.
Are you saying that this video is staged? I was a little disappointed, even though I didn't really believe in vampires.
I can't say for sure, but I do know that vampires exist in a different form than what you're used to seeing them in movies or books.
But in that case, they do exist. So do werewolves, the eternal enemies of vampires. I was a little puzzled by Ephraim's confidence.
How do you imagine it? Man is not capable of turning into a wolf very quickly. The body is not capable of such rapid metamorphosis.
But according to legends, vampires also turn into bats.
I never liked that part of the bat legend. It's total crap. Vampires can't turn into anything.
But they grow fangs, don't they? But that's not realistic either, since we're talking about transformations.
Vampires do not grow fangs. They function in a similar way to cat claws. The fangs are hidden in the upper part of the gums and appear when necessary.
I see that you know a lot about vampires. Then tell me what a real vampire looks like. I was excited in anticipation of an interesting story. At that moment it seemed to me that this stranger just wanted someone to talk to. He was just bored sitting alone. And I was interested in listening to him, too. I planned to tell my friends later about this Ephraim.
Okay, I'll tell you. I'll start with the simplest thing, appearance. Vampires differ from most humans in their tallness. The average vampire is about 2 meters tall. Have you noticed that I'm pretty tall, too? Vampires are thin. It's impossible to meet an overweight vampire. Vampires have pale skin, but not white, just paler than humans. Do you know people who are contraindicated from being in the sun? Their skin starts to hurt a lot. It's the same with vampires. Vampires' eyes are usually gray, less often white. Their hair is mostly dull shades or even gray. The main difference from humans in appearance are the hands and the presence of fangs. The fangs are clear, but I'll explain about the hands. Vampires' hands are more elongated, their fingers are bony and about twice as long as human hands, they have no nails, and their fingertips are decorated with claws, which vampires hide with ordinary gloves.
After Ephraim's story, I looked thoughtfully at the hands on his arms. They looked at least as big as mine, but I was under no illusion that Ephraim was a vampire. He was just tall enough, almost 6 feet tall. Even though Ephraim had said that vampires were tall, I still thought it was just a coincidence. I still didn't believe in vampires. Curious, I've never heard such a thing, not in movies or books, not even in legends. What weaknesses do vampires have? Does the sun and silver kill them?
The problem is that people confuse vampires with hybrids. But it's not your fault, it's just that humanity has the wrong information. A hybrid is a person bitten by a vampire. Hybrids are afraid of silver and sun, they are deadly to him. I will talk about hybrids a little later. The sun is unpleasant to vampires, but not deadly, it causes the vampire great pain. Silver is like a noxious product for humans, it makes the vampire feel mildly ill. Crucifixes and holy water have no effect on anything at all. True vampires are immortal and invulnerable.
My interlocutor kept fascinating me with his story. I was impatient, eager to get more information. What is deadly for vampires?
I will, but for your full understanding, John, I'll start at the beginning. First of all, vampires are not the spawn of the devil, they are a myth. And it's a disgusting myth. Vampires are a separate race that lived in ancient times on Mars, before this planet became lifeless. It was the vampires who made it lifeless. The atmosphere of Mars, unlike that of Earth, allowed vampires to feel comfortable during the day, not just at night. This was due to the composition of the planet. The vampires were a very advanced race, with a council of scientists at the head of the planet. It was difficult for humans to understand what it was like to have a society run by intelligent rulers who cared about the good of society. During the exploration of Mars, a huge cave was discovered in its depths, and in it, an unknown underground temple. Later it turned out that this temple belonged to the previous inhabitants of this planet. The temple was created at the end of their civilization. A race of Dysodiums, as they called themselves in their writings. The cave they found was simply a temple of knowledge accumulated by the Dysodiums over the course of their existence. It took many years to decipher this knowledge. After the first serious discoveries, there was a rift among the vampires. Some of the scholarly council were frightened by the knowledge gained, while others were tempted to use this knowledge for the benefit of the vampires. One of the most recent writings was about an artificial apocalypse. It said that the previous civilization had come too close to forbidden knowledge. The Dysodiums had reached their peak, their allotted time was over, they had simply been erased, leaving no trace. Only the secret temple was preserved as a message or warning. But the vampires decided that they could face the threat if they combined their knowledge with that of their predecessors. The Council of Scientists made a major breakthrough in genetics, making the vampire race immortal. They invented a life serum that worked from a mixture of vampire development and Dysodium's knowledge of Mars energy. Before taking such a serum, the average vampire lived about 300 Earth years, and vampires were also susceptible to various diseases like humans, which could contribute to their early death. The serum, developed with the help of ancient knowledge, was the crowning glory of vampire science. After this began to divide society into two parts, some vampires were chosen to live forever, others were condemned to death. It wasn't to everyone's liking, but it made sense. The Council of Scholars became eternal. There were many opponents of the serum. They understood that it was impossible to distribute the serum to absolutely everyone, or the vampires would be in danger of overpopulation. Still, the idea was not considered humane, though the serum was only given to the worthy. Of course, those who did not receive the serum understood that they were useless to society and did not deserve eternity. But they also felt the injustice, as it became increasingly difficult to become worthy and take a place among the Eternals, the reason being that the worthy did not die to make room for others. Therefore, there were fewer and fewer vacancies. Meanwhile, the council continued to experiment with the serum that made gods out of scientists, but the scientists were not satisfied. They thought that gods should rule over someone, teach someone, and instruct someone. A thirst for power seized them. The vampires decided to establish their power over a young developing race on the neighboring planet Earth. And at that moment, what was to be expected happened. Mars was invaded by the High Ones. The Highs are the next level race. The vampires turned out not to be the gods they thought they were, but just pathetic worms that crawled to the surface and tried to bite the leg of the true masters of the universe. And yet the High Ones saw the vampires as a threat, after which the vampires were exterminated in a short time. The vampires did not realize in time that they could not play with the power hidden in the depths of the secret temple. It was not for them. The surface of Mars was destroyed along with the vampires. Some vampires managed to escape to Earth, but the Highs created hunters whose goal was to destroy all remaining vampires. There wasn't to be a single vampire left in the entire universe. Those fools who were going to become gods to humans were destroyed first. Immortality didn't save them. Only 4 hunters were created. It seems that 4 warriors are not enough for an entire planet, but how do you defeat those who can easily deal with immortals? Not been easy for them, especially given the pride and strength inherent in the vampire race. It was difficult for vampires to live among undeveloped humans, especially in medieval times and earlier. They were also hindered by the Sun and Earth's atmosphere, since the serum of life had a different composition and was created in symbiosis with Mars rather than Earth. As a consequence, there was a side effect in the form of a thirst for human blood. Human, precisely because humans are very close in structure to vampires. Soon hybrids began to appear. The vampire's saliva turned out to be harmful to the human body. It began to turn humans into hybrids, a pathetic parody of a vampire. The hybrid psyche could not withstand the transformation. The hybrids became violent and uncontrollable. They lacked self-control, but the hybrids could not cope with their insatiable bloodlust. The hunters quickly spotted them. The vampires tried to create an army of hybrids to try to kill the hunters. Then they were able to study the hunters a little and realized that even 4 hunters was too many for the vampires. The hunters were creatures beyond our comprehension. They live differently than we do. I'll try to explain. Hunters are not three-dimensional like us, even time flows differently for them. Hunters can refract space and time. Only one earth element was unknown to them, and that was a miscalculation in their perfect mechanism. Vampires understood this and saved themselves with amulets created from this element. Hunters have roamed the earth for centuries in search of the last vampires. They have knowledge of them. It seems to me that they will understand when the last vampire is killed.
Ephraim fell silent. I was stunned by his story. I'd never heard that version of the origin of vampires, and yes, I knew about Count Dracula. I'd heard the version about Judas Iscariot, who was hung from an aspen and turned into a vampire, after which an aspen stake was considered deadly to vampires. But Ephraim's story made me dismiss all these theories forever. In addition, I got an answer to my main question about vampires. Why didn't they enslave humanity with the power they had? And always have to hide, leaving people information about themselves in the form of legends and fairy tales. And so I got an answer from a stranger. I didn't know the answer to why Ephraim had come up to me and told me the story of the vampires.
Those hybrids in that video you saw recently were killed by a hunter. That's their MO.
How do you know all this? And why are you telling me about it?
I told you our story, so that you would believe it and tell it to others. You must know the truth so that you will not repeat our mistakes. Sooner or later mankind will be on the threshold of permissibility, just as we are.
I looked into Ephraim's dim and tired gray eyes. I was very struck by his story. But I was increasingly frightened by his presence around me. Are you a vampire?
I think you figured that out yourself. I've been living too long. I'm tired.
I don't believe you, it's all untrue. In fact, I believed Ephraim. I began to believe in vampires after he told me, but logic and common sense prevented me from saying it out loud.
What confused you about my story?
You're a vampire, I get that. You fit the description. How old are you?
I don't know the answer to your question, John. When I fled to Earth, I was several hundred years old. Here I have lived even longer than that. I can't remember. 1 year is nothing for me to remember.
How have you not gone crazy with the vast amount of information you've acquired over so many centuries of living?
I just don't remember my whole life. I only remember some moments recorded in my memory. We were on the cusp of the cybernetic revolution when the apocalypse began, almost as much as you are now in the 21st century. I don't remember my childhood. I don't remember my family. That makes me very painful. This is what madness is all about.
I didn't know what to answer, and I no longer doubted the truth of my interlocutor's words. Moreover, I wanted more information, and I wanted to know about the cybernetics of vampires, among other things. Meanwhile, the street emptied out, my buddy was still lingering, and there was no one else on the nearby benches. Ephraim stood up, thanked me for the conversation, took a huge locket off his neck, and handed it to me.
This thing hid me from the hunters for a long time, but I got tired of hiding. One of them is nearby, so he'll smell me quickly. I'll wait for him here, and you go away.
I never understood what was so special about this locket that hid the vampire from the hunters. I couldn't even get it open. There was something inside that gold disc, I could feel it. I was afraid to stay and try to see the hunter in person. I don't know how he would behave, maybe he would get rid of me as a witness. One thing I know for sure, now I will try to find as much information about these hunters as I can, and I will decide what I will do with it later. I returned the next morning to the place where I had talked to Ephraim, where I found some dried blood and a leather glove lying on the lawn not far from my bench with him. Maybe I should try to join the guys in the video I'd watched before I met Ephraim. A very real vampire confirmed that vampires exist. Now I know more about hybrids and hunters. I think the guys could use my help.